So this evening, what we're going to be doing is rounding off our current theme, our current series, which has been stories of the path. We've been looking at the Buddhist path in terms of the 5 stages, the five great stages and 5 aspects of the path. So I can't remember when we started it. It seems like a long time ago, but way back in the past, we started off with integration. Quite a lot of talks where we looked at and explored at what does integration mean, where we kind of get to know ourselves and gather the different aspects of ourselves together to become an integrated person. Then we looked at positive emotion, where we cultivate emotions based on metta, but joy, shraddha, compassion, and metta, looking at positive emotion. Then in the recent weeks, we've looked at spiritual death and rebirth through the life of the Buddha, the next 2 stages. This evening what we're going to be doing is rounding off the series by hearing from 3 personal talks from Alex, who's going to talk about integration, Jenny, who's going to talk about, I've forgotten what you're going to talk about, Jenny. Spiritual death and rebirth. And then I'm going to talk about receptivity, which is a 5th element that we haven't really focused on. So I'm going to just introduce you a little bit to what that is and give a personal talk about receptivity. So I'd like to welcome Alex, ask Alex to come up and Satyajyoti's got a tulip and she's going to wave it after 7 minutes and that'll give you a minute warning for Jenny and for Alex, and in theory for me as well, to stop talking after a minute.
Thank you, Bodhanaga. I'm just gonna find my page. So, integration, is my book going to stay open? Yeah. So integration, when I was thinking about what I was going to say, I had a very strong memory of science experiments we did in high school, the Newton wheel. And so what Isaac Newton basically saw, he saw white light going through a pane of glass or a glass prism, and it split into all the colors of the rainbow. And he theorized that if you got a disc with said colors and span it really, really fast, you'd get white light again. Looks white on Zoom as well. It works. And that's the metaphor symbol I'm going to hook the rest of my talk off. Because for me, my experience of integration has been kind of discovering the colors of my wheel and kind of getting them spinning in all the same direction, kind of unblocking the colors, refining them, untangling them. And to start off with, I started meditating 3 years ago. I was using an app called 10% Happier. I kind of sat down and was just hit with a barrage of thoughts of planning. What was I going to eat? What was I going to do next week? How was I going to do this assignment? What was I going to do on holiday in 4 months' time? There's so much energy going into planning and planning and planning. So I was like, oh, this is quite distressing. It was quite anxious planning. And 21-year-old me was like, oh, I'm gonna journal. I'm gonna make a diary and write everything down. And looking back, it's quite funny that I discovered just having a diary, basically. But when I did start planning things, I kind of had more energy to kind of go about my day-to-day life. And the second part of integration that I'm doing, some of my friends will know I wrote a poem every day last year. In the toilets of the Buddhist center, there was a post that was like, mind reactive, mind creative, an advertisement to a retreat. I didn't actually go on the retreat. Bodhinaga was talking at it, but my interest was perked in the sense that I could be creative and that would somehow help me on the Buddhist path. So I was like, yeah, I like being creative. Well, I didn't think I was creative at the time. I was like, I could do that. What should I do? I'll write a poem every day. And kind of the process of writing a poem every day, I had to basically learn how to become inspired every day, use the mundane material of my everyday life and try and turn it into something beautiful, trying and failing a lot. There's some really bad poems from last year. But through that process, I kind of learned about myself and learned how to be with difficult emotions. I think particularly of a series of poems I wrote about anger, my relationship with anger, why I couldn't express it, memories of angry people, and anger, and then momentum. So from doing the same thing every day for a year, I kind of learned that by turning my mind to something and then deciding I was going to do it, then doing it every day for a year really gave me a lot of momentum. And it's that sort of momentum that we need to kind of lead a spiritual life, and a really immense momentum that you can't really imagine you're going to need to kind of become enlightened to kind of tip you over. So that's something of that flavor to kind of get the wheels spinning, to kind of create the white light that you can then eventually become non-identified with. But then that's Jenny's talk about spiritual death. And then finally, another experience of integration was off the back of me deciding I was a poet. I went on a poetry retreat in Alfoxden, where Wordsworth and Coleridge lived for a year, these two great romantic poets, and I was going to poet for a week and write beautiful poems, meet beautiful people in a beautiful place. And actually what happened was I was really anxious, really confused, and quite sad because I was anxious and confused for this whole week. It was really painful. And that kind of carried on after the retreat for a good couple of months, this anxiety and confusion. And what it turned out was there was a fight going on inside of me between my 18-year-old self and my 24-year-old self. The 24-year-old self was really going for it, really wanted beauty and Buddhism and all of this great stuff. My 18-year-old self was like quite unskillful, quite ugly. All he really wanted to do was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I was very promiscuous, smoking lots of weed and partying far too much. And what the anxiety came out of was this all-out battle between 18-year-old self and 24-year-old self. Just like, I want to be in charge. I want to be in charge. And through kind of meditation and metta bhavana, I kind of engendered this conversation, mediated this conversation, and kind of brought it down. And now there's more of me behind what I'm trying to do. The discussion's still happening. I still have to honor my 18-year-old self, honor his needs and everything, but he's less in control, should we say. I'm less anxious as a result. And to conclude, I'm going to read a poem. It's not my poem. It's far better than any of my poems. And it's really helped me on the kind of path of integration. And for me, it is a symbol of integration. It's called The Cure by Albert Hofstadter. We think we get over things. We don't get over things. Or say, we get over measles, but not a broken heart. We need to make that distinction. The things that become part of our experience never become less a part of our experience. How can I say it? The way to get over a life is to die. Short of that, you move with it. Let the pain be pain, not in the hope that it will vanish, but in the faith that it will fit in. Find its place in the shape of things, and be then not any less pain, but true to form. Because anything natural has an inherent shape and will flow towards it. And a life is as natural as a leaf. That's what we're looking for. Not the end of a thing, but the shape of it. Wisdom is seeing the shape of your life without obliterating, getting over, a single instant of it. Thank you.
Some air, that's nice. Hi, everyone. I'm going to start with a poem. This one's by someone, Tadeusz Rosewicz, I think is how you say it. It's called Busy with Too Many Jobs. Busy with too many jobs, I forgot one also has to die. Irresponsible, I kept neglecting that duty, or performed it perfunctorily. As from tomorrow, things will be different. I'll start dying meticulously, wisely, optimistically, and without wasting time. So this poem it's about physical death in a way, but it's about the preparation for that, which I think is much more akin to spiritual death. And so I'm going to talk a bit about reflections on spiritual death and rebirth in the last year or so. And I was thinking about the Buddha the other day, as you do when you're a Buddhist. But no, I was thinking about the four sights. And so you had this young prince in his palace with his dancing girls, and he decided that he felt he wanted to go and see something. He felt there was something else out there. And so, as we've heard, he went out, he saw an old person, a sick person, a dead body, and a holy man, who had eschewed his old life and was kind of searching for a way, to understand and maybe a way out of the cycle of human suffering. And in a way, I was thinking, we've all seen the four sights this year, haven't we, really? With the pandemic and COVID, I think things like sickness and death have really come much closer to us than I think we've typically held them. And then I think us here and on Zoom as well, the Buddhist Centre and maybe even the Mogavamsa is our holy man. This place is us thinking there's something more. And so I think we've perhaps been spurred on to kind of go forth. But when I look around and when I look at myself, we haven't all kind of fallen to the ground enlightened yet, as in the Buddhist stories. So we've maybe had kind of glimmers of something there's something else. But I've been curious about, so how do you take those glimmers, and then what's the process where that actually just becomes a much more sustained sense of that your sense of self is more fluid, and that actually we are just intrinsically interconnectedness. So stopping the clinging to a sense of a fixed and separate self, that's really, for me, spiritual death. And I've been thinking about my own experience in the last year, and I've definitely had some glimmers where I've kind of got away from a sense of my, I have a massive self project going on most of the time, but sometimes in this last year I've realized that that's not the thing. And I think, I've mentioned in some of the other talks and discussions this year, another thing that happened in my life this year was my mum dying quite unexpectedly before COVID. And her death, I didn't think my mum was going to die. So this really brought mortality to me. But what I'm noticing in the grief and the processing is actually there's been another insight that actually I've inherited a lot of my mum's worldviews, and it's become more clear now she's not there. And so it's not me. I thought these things were me, and they're not. And they're not even mum. I think, she's got them from somewhere else. And this has felt like a gateway. And the good thing is as well that these things I've inherited they're not pleasant either. I've inherited some of my mum's fears about how capable I am, and also how whole I can be. And so this aspect of spiritual death is potentially quite good, because this isn't true. Although spiritual death is about letting go of everything, even if I had some nice things I've inherited, it's all going. And this, when I've had glimmers of this, I've just wanted to die again spiritually, like again and again. Sangha Gita sometimes talks about this idea of like your turban being on fire, and I'm just like, this is it. But then some days I'm not like that. And you'd think like, well, why if you've had these glimmers, is it not, why don't you just kind of like, why aren't you always like that? And looking at myself, it's fear. And so actually there's a fear of losing my fear, which you could say that's a bit weird. But it's actually not, is it? Because losing, like my self project is quite predictable. And so it's secure. And so I've got to be in the right place to be able to let go of this project. And sometimes I am, and sometimes I'm not. And that's where the integration and the positive emotion comes, I think. And some days I'm just not, I haven't got enough positive emotion to kind of hold this. But I've noticed that some days I can. And what is really important for me, I think, is metta. And it's also self-forgiveness. I can have the insight that actually none of these thoughts I have about myself are really true. And so things open up. But then this self-judgment comes in of like, well, you could have, like, didn't you know that earlier? Like, you did this and you did that, like, stupid you. Like, and it's horrible. And I'm particularly harsh to my poor teenage self, who I'm actually learning, these 18-year-olds, right? I'm like, poor thing, she was just doing her best. And when I can forgive myself for this stuff, then I can, because judgment is, I mean, it's immediately, I've solidified things again, and my judgment is like, you were like this, and this is what I think about it, and suddenly there's a self there again. And so then, like, metta. Yanavacha has a lovely phrase that I'm paraphrasing, that with enough metta, you can't help but transcend yourself. And I find that really comforting, and I'm getting glimmers of it. And it's just amazing. So that's where I am, having some foresights, sometimes feeling transcendental, most often not. But I'm inspired. And so I want the truth. And so I think I'll just finish with another verse. It's from a Christian pastor, I think, called Lewis Smedes, which kind of relates to my own experience of spiritual death and rebirth. And so he says, to forgive is to set a prisoner free and to discover that the prisoner was you. Thank you.
Wow, two really moving talks, two really great talks. So hopefully I can follow that. I do feel stirred up, actually. So there's a stage of spiritual receptivity that we haven't talked about much yet at Sangha Night as part of the series, but Padmavajra talked about it last week. We tuned into Padmavajra speaking last week, and the main thing he talked about, he said, was he talked about the beginning, the middle, and the end of the path as being responsiveness, this kind of responsiveness to other people, a kind of, the term was anukampa, vibrating with, resonating with other beings and responding to them. And he talked about the culmination of the path of Buddhahood being the stage of no more action, or the stage of receptivity. But he described it in these terms, in terms of responsiveness, responding to other beings. And very beautiful talk if you weren't there last week. So I haven't got much to say about the end of the path from a personal point of view, so I can't really talk about the end of the path. But all of these qualities, they are distinct stages that we will go through on the path, but they're also qualities that we need at every stage of the path. It's a mysterious, a mysterious mix. And I sometimes like to think of them as ingredients in a recipe. Like, we need all of these 5 ingredients in our Dharma life for it to be really potent and really vital. So we need this element of receptivity in our Dharma life now. So that's what I want to talk about, is how we practice receptivity now, and the path, like this quality of no more action and responsiveness as well. So the first thing I want to talk about, it's not a whole poem, it's just a verse of a very famous poem, which is, what is this life if full of care? We have no time to stop and stare. And once I did read the whole poem and I thought it was quite good, but that's the main line that really resonates with me. What is this life if we're so full, so busy, as like Jenny's poem said, if we're so full of care that we actually haven't got time to stop and take things in and just really stare at things. And what I do remember, I didn't encounter a lot of poetry in my youth, but I remember the Green Cross Code from learning to cross the road safely, which was to stop, look, and listen. But I think this applies just to life in general as well. Just from time to time, we just need to stop and just to look and listen, because there's the danger is we're just so busy that we just get to the end of our life and we've never done that. We've never really noticed the beauty of life or really immersed ourselves in it. We've just been so busy doing things. And this is a real danger of our society, I think, really, that we kind of can't help but getting swept up in this constantly doing, constant busyness, constantly doing, constant activity, constant productivity. And from time to time, we just need to stop and look and listen, just to pause and look around. And this last year for me has been very, very busy, actually. There's not been, partly circumstances, just having a lot of extra childcare, a lot of responsibility. There hasn't really been, it felt like, time to stop and pause and be receptive. But then that can become habitual. And recently there has been time where I've got a lot more space in my life, but it's just, I found it very difficult to get out of that habit of being busy, really difficult to stop and be at ease, really, just to be content. So it can become habitual. And even today I went to the Botanical Gardens in Sheffield, and I wanted to visit the magnolia trees because over recent years, I've become friends with the magnolia trees in the Botanical Gardens. That might sound like a strange thing to say, but they do feel like friends of mine now. Every year the blossoms come and they're so beautiful. And I like to go and visit them. It's only for a few weeks that the blossoms are out, and then they scatter and then they're gone until the next year. And last year I couldn't go to visit them, I think because there's a particular stage of the lockdown where you had to stay very local. So I didn't see them last year, and I haven't seen them yet this year. But I went today, and I just, it was beautiful just to stand and be, it does feel like they're alive and they have a personality, they're kind of beings. That's how I experience them. And at the same time, I couldn't help but look at my phone. I was kind of standing with these beautiful trees that I regard as my friends, and they was only there for the next week or so, and then the blossoms are gone. But I couldn't help but feel like something I should be doing. I should be looking at my phone, and I just should be thinking about this talk. It's very difficult just to stop and really be with these trees. So that's the first element of receptivity, is just kind of stopping the doing, and then it's almost like a different way of being, a different way of experiencing, where we're just receptive. We're just being, we're not doing, we're being human. We're human beings, not human doings. So it's being rather than doing. And there's an element of the Dharma life, or there's two aspects of the Dharma life. One is effort, and then the other is receptivity. There's activity and there's receptivity. And we need to make effort to create conditions and to make changes in our life, but then we also need to allow space and room for the fruits of that, for the consequences of that, for the transformation to happen. And if we can be so busy doing stuff, endlessly doing stuff, like kind of trying to make things happen, it just gets in the way of those things happening. We kind of can end up blocking the transformation because we're so busy trying to make things happen. We get in the way. We kind of almost sabotage it. So there's creating the conditions and then just allowing the fruits to emerge. There's these two dynamics in the spiritual life. And this is the same in meditation. So for example, in the mindfulness of breathing meditation, I went on a retreat. It was just over a year ago now. It seems a long time ago, but it was an actual retreat in an actual retreat centre. And it was Satyaraja at Padmaloka leading the meditation essentials. Alex was there as well. And I remember him talking about the mindfulness of breathing. So is there anybody who, when you ring the final bell for the meditation, gets absorbed? And I put my hand up straight away, like the whole of the mindfulness of breathing, like I'm not getting absorbed, my mind's active and busy. And then as soon as the final bell goes and I just stop making an effort, suddenly I'm absorbed, but it's too late because the meditation's finished. And Satyaraja, that's just a kind of sign that you're trying a bit too hard, making just too much effort in the meditation. And it's, a cue that you need to just relax and pause in a way, just to stop. So the same dynamic's true in meditation. We can be making effort to work with our mind, to calm our mind, but then we also need to just pause and not make any effort and just see what emerges in a way. And it's something I'm working with. For me, what I discovered on that retreat is the idea for me of not making any effort at all is probably closer to the kind of effort I need to be making. But it could be misunderstood because we definitely need to work with our minds. But then if we bring this same dynamic of endlessly doing it, being so busy, which it's a habit from our lives, we bring that to meditation, it just gets in the way of the fruits emerging in meditation. So we just need to pause and allow the fruits to emerge. Similarly, in the Metta-bhavana meditation, there's activity and there's receptivity. We bring a friend to mind, and then we pause and we just say, well, how does that feel? What emerges? What emotions are there when we bring a friend to mind? We bring a reflection to mind around the sameness of self and other, or with the phrases, drop a phrase in. But then we pause and we just see, well, what effect does that have? What emotions are emerging? What changes are happening in my emotional world? So there's this dance in a way between being active, doing something, and then just sitting back and waiting and pausing and just experiencing the fruits of that activity. So the same is true both in the Dharma life and in meditation. Well, meditation is part of the Dharma life. So all aspects of the Dharma life, we need to be both active and receptive in this way. And when we do that, it's when we leave spaces, often that's when new things can emerge. So these new perspectives that Jenny was talking about and discoveries about ourselves, transcending our old self. It's like if we're so busy, habitually being busy, there's no space, there's no gaps for these new perspectives to arise, these new insights to arise. It's often when we stop trying to understand the Dharma verse or text that a new perspective can arise. We can put lots of effort in, which is necessary to reflect and try and understand a verse or a text. But then often it's when we stop doing that, we go for a walk, suddenly clarity can emerge. It's in those gaps when we stop trying to make something happen that something new can arise. So if we're not careful, if we're so busy and we don't leave gaps, there's no space for for new qualities to emerge, new understandings to emerge, new perspectives to emerge. So you could say that wisdom speaks in a really quiet and gentle voice. And if our mind is so busy and our life is so busy, it just gets drowned out. We can't hear that. We can't hear the wisdom from ourselves or the wisdom from our friends and teachers or the wisdom from Dharma texts, the wisdom from kind of higher sources. If we're so busy, there's no space for that. We're not creating the conditions for that wisdom to emerge. So we need to allow our life to be less busy sometimes, to just operate in a different space, not to be doing, just to be being. And this is this quality of receptivity that we need to cultivate throughout our Dharma life. And then I just need to end actually, because it's time to end. But just to say also, in my Dharma life, there's another element of receptivity, which is I practice a meditation, a visualization of the Buddha Amitabha. And in doing that, I'm trying to create the conditions where I'm receptive to this is where it becomes hard to speak about really, but receptive to Amitabha, receptive to what Amitabha represents in terms of the enlightened mind, in terms of quality and reality in the universe, maybe in terms of aspects of myself that I'm not aware of yet, that are latent. But I'm trying to, through doing this meditation practice, and it's not just the meditation practice, in a way it's my whole life. I'm trying to do is create the conditions to be receptive to what Amitabha, what Amitabha represents, what Amitabha is, the Buddha Amitabha. And so there's a whole tradition in Buddhism which it's what's called the Pure Land tradition, which involves being receptive to Amitabha. There's a whole tradition that's emerged. I mean, it's not how we practice in Triratna, but there's receptivity can take you a long way. So mantra is really important to me, chanting the mantra and being receptive to what emerges from me, what the changes that happen in my consciousness when I chant the mantra. Receptive to the colour red, which is Amitabha, the red light of Amitabha. So when I see the colour red around me, when I see sunlight reflected on water, which is an element of Amitabha visualization, just being receptive to that, really. Yeah, and recently I found it difficult to do that meditation practice. And, again, I think it's to do with the busyness. I talked about the busyness of my life in the past year. And in the last couple of months, it's become quite a challenge for me to do the meditation practice. And what came to mind recently was something I encountered when I was a Christian, like in a previous pre-Buddhist life, as it were. And it was a prayer, or kind of a metaphor, where someone was complaining to God in a way and saying, well, I look back along the beach and there's one pair of footprints on this beach. And it was a time when it was really difficult in my life and you abandoned me, you weren't there. And then reply from God comes, well, I was carrying you, those footsteps are my footprints. And it was me that was carrying you through those difficult times. And in a way, it feels a bit like it's been like that with Amitabha over the last few months. I haven't really been able to put the effort and I haven't really been able to do my bit, as it were, but I've still felt in a pretty good state, actually. I've still felt like, I've still felt in a good state. And I just think, well, actually, I think, Amitabha has been carrying me in a way. That's what it's felt like. Amitabha has helped me through this difficult time. That's what it's felt like. So I wanted to talk about that aspect of receptivity, even though it's difficult to talk to. It might be difficult to relate to as well if you don't have a visualization practice in the same way as order members do. But I just wanted to include that element of receptivity. So anyway, I'll just end my talk by just rounding up what I've said. In a way, there's a culmination of the path, which is no more action, responsiveness. But for us, we just need to practice stopping, doing and being, just stop looking and listening. And in meditation, there's times when we need to just stop and be receptive, as well as in life. And then new perspectives, new understandings can emerge. But also, like there can be, a completely different experience can emerge as well. Something very different can emerge in those conditions as well. So, a little flavour of receptivity and some of my experiences of receptivity.